Hello, and welcome back to the Void Century podcast. I'm Adam and Ed, and we are here to bring you chapter 1154 of One Piece, entitled I Can't Die. Before we begin, after our hiatus, we have had an influx of new viewers, and to our returning viewers, I would just like to remind you that not only do we do a breakdown and an overview of the most recent chapter, but towards the end afterwards, we have a vast discussion and speculation section. So you don't want to miss it. And again, this is the Void Century podcast, here to bring you chapter 1154 of One Piece, entitled I Can't Die. And we start the chapter with the cover page where we see Yamato and Okiku, and they are going to pay homage to a grave, it seems. Now, I believe we've seen this before in the Ringo region with the swords all over it. On the bottom, it states, at the grave of a hero born in the West, blue and brought up in Ringo. So it makes sense that they are talking about Ryuma, the famed swordsman of Wano. Take it away, Ed.
All right, so we begin 63 years ago, and we see Ja Rule. He's the current present-day oldest giant, and they talk about him losing his partner, Lord Jo Rule. So they were actually co-captains of a pirate crew, I believe. And unfortunately, Jo Rule was struck dead by Charlotte Linlin as a child. And of course, we all know that she grew up to be the Emperor Big Mom. So throughout this year, Elbaf started to face many, many different tragedies and a lot of natural disasters. So sudden fires, windstorms and gales, cold waves that killed many of their crops, and different weather that brought fishing to a halt. So Elbaf basically was overcome with famine. So Queen Estrid, Loki's mother, uses these disasters as proof that all of these bad things are happening due to the curse that the birth of Loki brought to the land. And she has a guard, and he's kind of doubting her, and he's saying, I don't know, it could just be a coincidence. Then next we see Estrid saying she doesn't even like seeing Loki look at her. Again, he still has those strange looking cat's eyes. So she demands Loki be taken away and never have that monster near her ever again. So while they're dragging off baby Loki as an infant, he's already as tall as the normal giant guards. So it takes more than one to kind of drag him off. And Loki's crying. It's really sad. And Queen Estrid then demands the guards to gouge out Loki's eyes, because if he's left unchecked, he's going to bring the collapse of Elbaf. So I don't think they actually took out his eyes or anything. They just did the wraps so that they weren't visible anymore.
Moving on, we then see a crying mother and child holding each other because they are hungry. The famine is ravaging Elbaf. The warriors of Elbaf are debating and fighting amongst themselves over whether or not they should raid a human village to save them from their famine. One side wants to raid, the other says it would bring shame to the warriors of Elbaf. We then see that a tribe of giants from the Huntsman village has started to attack the other villages to plunder them for resources. We then learn that giants have fought themselves and each other before in civil wars. However, they were never this severe and bloody. Elbaf, quite honestly, has been engulfed in chaos and misery. Rumors start spreading from the other giants throughout the land that Loki is cursed, and that this curse is the reason for the current crises that Elbaf is facing. We then see a panel of Haruden and his mother Ida, and we see a random giant raider bust through the door, seemingly of their house, and basically states that because Loki has brought curse to the land, the only way to appease the curse is to sacrifice Haruden. Ida stands up to protect her son and says that Haruden is a cutie who's going to be the world's longest living man. And we then see the raider pick up Ida and attempt to strike her, claiming that the only reason she is even here at all is because she seduced Harold. And Ida says she loves this country. We see Haruden about to try to strike this individual, and we see a giant hockey flavored fist come out of nowhere, only to see that it is attached to one King Harald, who has made his triumphant return to his homeland of Elbaf.
So next we see King Harold kind of having a speech with all of Elbaf and realizing the internal strife and anguish in his country right now due to the famine, he addresses all of the people. He exclaims that the giants shouldn't be fighting against each other. While he was away, word did reach out about Loki's birth and the famine. So while Harold was out there building alliances with various nations, he told them about the famine that struck his home country, and now these new allied nations decided to come to their aid without hesitation. So great alliances have been forged. The human nations loaded a lot of food to be shipped to Elbaf, and Harold says that while the humans are small in stature, they have very large wills. The allied nations came together to make sure that the Elbaf giants would get enough food to be truly sated and for their giant stomachs. It's a lot of food. And then we actually see like giant boats or just boats just filled with food, and many of them, fleets of ships coming to Elbaf. Harold announces that Elbaf would graciously accept the humans' aids, and then that the giant people must fill their hearts with gratitude and support for the humans. Harold then tells his people that whenever these nations are in trouble, they should remember how they were helped during these troubling times and return their favor with all of their might. But this world is ours to share. What a great quote. Then we see Queen Estrid's death, basically. So she kept blaming everything Loki publicly up until she died, and the people believe that her death was part of Loki's curse, unfortunately. Harold is in mourning. We see him crying. Harold finally meets Loki for the first time, and we see him lifting baby Loki. Loki's eyes are now bandaged. The guards told Harold that it's because he's got like a condition with his eyes, but that Loki still is able to see. And tragically, a few months old, Loki has already given up on love. So even though he's finally getting that attention and love that he craved from his mother, but through Harold, he's not really accepting it anymore, and it's really sad. And then Harold comments on Loki's bruises and scuffs, and nobody really says anything about it.
We then have a jump cut where we see Elbaf is kind of getting back to normal. Harold's diplomacy has started to bear fruit. He has focused on aligning all the different territories into one nation of Elbaf. We see the country has started to prosper. Harold has been focusing on logistics and really bolstering the infrastructure of his nation. We then see that Estrid's brother has been appointed to be the steward of Loki during this time because Harold is just too busy taking care of the country, so he needs to leave Loki under the care of a trusted advisor. We do see that Estrid's brother, whose name is not mentioned, does not like Loki and directly blames him for the death of his sister. So we then get a jump cut where we see Ida and Hasrudin again. We see them in a tavern, seemingly that they own and live at. Ida is in typical giant fashion, using a axe as a keg tap. Rudin is a little worried about living in the realm of the dead and of the giant monsters that are all about. And Ida goes forward to tell him that the coastline separates the tavern from the rest of the realm of the dead, so that they should be just fine and they have nothing to worry about. And then mentions that Hasrudin should be more concerned about his warrior training with Elbow from the west. Ida then goes on to state that this is her tavern and it is open to everyone, all friends, regardless of color, creed, or race. We then have another jump cut to 56 years ago. We see Ja Rule's house, and Ja Rule is sitting there discussing things with Harold. They are discussing reverie, where it is noted that a certain incident occurred during the reverie. Harald said he was a friend of one of the kings and he was able to attend the reverie because he was cosplaying a guard or a soldier. He said when he tried to ask questions to a certain unnamed council at reverie, they would not hear him out. And then Harold goes on to state, if that murder had not happened, I might have been exposed. And then Ja Rule goes on to talk about the consequences of being caught, basically saying if you were caught, that would be the least of your worries. And then they start discussing a team of giants called the Galela Band. And the Galela Band was a troop of giant shipwrights who fought with hammers. Harold says he heard of this band before, but he thought that they were just a myth. And Ja Rule goes on to state that no, they were very much alive, and they used to send letters back to Elbaf after traveling around the world. However, one day Elbaf got one final message that stated that they had all been captured, and since then, nobody has heard from them. Harold goes on to remark that it was over 100 giants, including ancient giants, that were defeated and captured by a mysterious foe. Harold asks if the world government was responsible for the disappearance of the Galela Band. And Ja Rule goes to state that even long ago in the past, the giants have always faced an enemy, a great enemy, and that history has sank and completely removed any trace of the Galela Band or any of that information. And then Ja Rule goes on to state that this history could perhaps be the reason why Harold's diplomacy with the humans has not worked, because there is a lingering animosity among the world. And then goes on to state that there is a myth of frozen giants somewhere out in the world, and that giants appear to be the enemies of the larger world. Harold then seems to be resolved to care for his people.
Alright, so next we cut back to baby Loki, and he's under his steward, which is actually his uncle. And the steward is like, let's see what rotten scraps I should feed you today. So he's not treating him very well. Then we cut forward like a year or two, and Loki's a little older, and they say that the lucky horse is dead, the one that his mother gifted to Harold. And then we cut again a few years later, and they said, oh no, the regent is dead down in the underworld. So again, I believe that that's his uncle. So next we're 48 years ago in the past. The country of Elbaf continues to thrive under Harald, and Harald's dream is for the giants to be welcome over the whole world. And we see that he's got a bunch of adoring fans. They're all cheering for him, saying he's the best king. Then we cut over to Hadrudin, and there's random giants that are picking on him, saying that he isn't the heir and he's just a bastard. We also have Loki. He's causing havoc and chaos while Harald is away. He's got a group of animals that are listening to him, and they're kind of like terrorizing different giants. We get Hadrudin and Loki facing off, and they argue over calling Harald dad. Obviously, Harald is both of their fathers, but they have kind of like a rivalry. Loki thinks that Harald is dumb for favoring humans, and Hadrudin is more open-minded, and he gets ready to fight. Loki smacks Hadrudin with his Oni club, and Loki declares that he is the prince. Gerd runs over to Hadrudin to heal him, and all the kids run to Hadrudin to help him out. So Loki is upset by this, that Hadrudin has support and friends, and all he has is his animal companions. He calls them pathetic, and just a bunch of weaklings, and he says that Hadrudin's mother taints his blood. Hadrudin's friends, of course, call Hadrudin Prince, and Loki lashes out. Next, we get the narrator explaining that Loki lashed out, but it never healed the hole in his heart. So he's still just very sad. Loki tries to jump out of a tree to the lower realm. Sorry, the lower realm. And it's a scene kind of reminiscent of Kaido jumping and falling from Skypiea. And Loki falls down and he says, I can't even die. And he's crying and feeling sorry for himself.
Immediately, as he's lying on the ground, crying and feeling sorry for himself, we get a panel in which we see Loki in the foreground and a landscape in the back. We see a mountaintop getting sliced off, and we hear a group of people speaking amongst themselves. They seem to be lost. This is their first time on Elbaf. We see the animals that inhabit the lower realm are running in fear. And then we see a group of four small people. These are humans approaching Loki, a giant. They say, oh, we found one and it's a giant. This is definitely Elbaf. And then we get a small panel of what looks to be Shiki, the golden lion. And they comment on how ugly and how demonic Loki looks. We also see a young Whitebeard who is concerned with Loki and asking him why he's crying. Then we get kind of a zoomed out view of this band of people in which we see a young Whitebeard, a young Shiki, and a young Miss Bucket. The narrator goes on to state that Harald spotted a particular man 8 years ago during the reverie. This man single-handedly killed a Navy admiral during the reverie and vanished without a trace. This feat earned him a massive bounty and the government's ire. And then we see a panel of a man shown from above. You can't see his face too well, and he's saying, I'm not the kind of person that likes to play around. You need to answer these two questions, and you better say yes. And then he says, is this Elbaf, the land of the giants? And then we get a picture of this man's face. And then he says, will we find Harald here? And then we get the One Piece character introduction of none other than Rox D. Zebek himself. The narrator goes on to state this is the future captain of the Rocks Pirates and the father of the Emperor Blackbeard himself. Ooh, I got chills, Ed. We've been waiting for this moment for what seems to be decades at this point.
Yeah, we finally see Rox D. Zebek. He looks like Blackbeard. He looks really cool. I think we should probably just start getting into the discussion part of this. So, you know what? Let's start with Rox, actually, because it's just what we ended on, and it's the most hype portion of the story, or at least this chapter. So, yeah, you want to talk about his character design a little bit?
Sure. We can go ahead and talk about his character design. The first thing that really is striking to me about Rox is he's got the hair all up. He looks almost like a Super Saiyan version of what Blackbeard would look like. He looks just really chaotic. He almost reminds me of Akuma from the Street Fighter series. He has kind of an open fur coat. He's got those crazy eyes. And he's got a scar marking the left side of his face. Now, many of our listeners might not know this, but I have a certain pet theory that the markings on the side of the face in One Piece for prominent characters is very important. You see a lot of really prominent characters in One Piece with markings on their face, more specifically the left eye. So if we're talking about the left characters that have really important left eye markings in One Piece, we're talking people among the ranks of Luffy, Zoro, Sabo, Garp, Dragon, Shanks, Ripley, X Drake, Kid, and even Harold himself. So there is definitely some kind of connection here. And now that I mention all these people, I mean, if these people are all assumed to be D's or affiliated with the D's as well, I don't think it would be a far stretch to think Harold himself could be a D. We've seen Jaguar D. Saul, who is a giant, not an Elbafian giant, but he is a giant, and he is also a D.
Yeah, I want to just
And
mention that I don't think Zoro's a D, but he has the eye markings. So I think that if this theory is true, that it's just important people and maybe people who are D's who have the will of the D are more likely to have some sort of marking or scar on their left eye.
I want to say they might not be affiliated with the D's themselves. I do want to say they're probably affiliated with the ancient kingdom that housed a lot of D's, but also a lot of the friends of D's, such as the samurai from Wano, which Zoro is definitely a descendant of, right?
Right, right. And we all
So,
know that Ryuma is the number one swordsman in all of history, and if Zoro's, his ancestor, or Ryuma Zoro's ancestor, it makes sense that Zoro is an important figure in the story.
100%. So, with that being said, as well, going off the eye markings a little bit, we do know that the Jolly Roger in our universe and the One Piece universe is the symbol for all pirates, right? And in the One Piece world, we know that Joy Boy was the first pirate himself. So Joy Boy is responsible for crafting the first Jolly Roger. He is also responsible for what a pirate is in the One Piece world. And I think it would only make sense if Joy Boy came from Jaya. Now, for those of you who may or may not remember Jaya, Jaya was part of the Mocktown Skypiea arc way, way back in One Piece, and we know Skypiea is so prominent in the One Piece story. Skypiea used to be a part of Jaya, but it was knocked up into the air by the knockup stream. But there is a specific map from back in One Piece past where they put Jaya together with Skypiea, and the completed island, the way it used to look back 1,000 years ago, prior to the Void Century, was that of a skull. Now, to all of our listeners, if you would go and look at this picture of this skull, of this map of Jaya and Skypiea together, you will note that there is a line of trees over the left eye. I know it sounds really tinfoil hat and I sound like a complete conspiracy nut, but there is a line of trees over the left eye, which perfectly syncs up with a lot of these prominent figures that we have seen in the One Piece story. So I think it's not a stretch that Joy Boy or the D's themselves would be from Jaya. They are descendants from a clan that lived on Jaya, and by you know spreading their methodology and spreading their will across the world, they would also want to represent the place where they came from, so to speak, which would be a skull. It would be the Jolly Roger, and just to spice this up just a tiny bit more, Luffy and Blackbeard, when they had their first meeting and they had the whole pie eating and rum drinking I don't think it was rum drinking competition, but they had the whole pie eating competition and they had the discussion of dreams. Where were they? None other than Mocktown, which is itself a part of Jaya, which just goes to show, much like our real world, stories and timelines sometimes don't repeat themselves, but they do tend to rhyme. What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, so I actually really like the idea of Joy Boy coming from old Jaya before it got split off into Skypiea. It makes sense that the Jolly Roger would be like a flag of like the country that he's from. So in his case, it wasn't necessarily a Jolly Roger, it was just a flag of a map of his country. And then future pirates, they adopted this, and I mean, I guess it starts with like Gold Roger when he did the. Well, no, never mind. It doesn't start with Gold Roger, but yeah, like they just adopted that, and they're like, okay, this is the norm. So in future generations, they didn't really realize what the skull really meant, and they just always included the skull. And they also kind of put their own flair on it. For instance, Luffy has the straw hat over his. So yeah, I just think that it does kind of just make a lot of sense that the first pirate would come from an island that looks like a skull.
Here's one more thing I just wanted to note that I did realize while you were discussing this. If you think about it, right? So, if Joy Boy originally went sailing with this skull as his Jolly Roger and as the symbol of his homeland and his ideology. Where do the crossbones come from? I would believe it would be X marks the spot. Or if we do believe that the One Piece is the end all be all of the story of the pirates, I think that upon Joy Boy's death, it would make sense that the X marks the spot, the One Piece, which we also see with the road poneglyphs. There are four. You map them out, and wherever they cross, that's where Raftail is. That's where the One Piece is. Think about it.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense with the X marks the spot. I like that a lot. So yeah, like if we say that Jaya is like the home of this like ancient people and potentially the source of where the will of the D came from, it like we were talking about how maybe the island was kind of split off into multiple factions. So there was like kind of like the good guys and the bad guys. So we've seen that there are people who have the will of the D that are quote unquote good guys like Luffy. And then we've seen people who are quote unquote bad guys with the will of D like Blackbeard. So like there's probably like an ancient, I don't know, like struggle or just disagreement that just kept going through. But at the end of the day, it does seem like both sides are still united in the fact that they are kind of anti-world government. So I don't know. I just think that that's kind of interesting.
We do see that the D's tend to take care of their own. I don't want to step on any toes or mention anything that we might have planned for later. But the D's tend to take care of themselves. I did have that pet theory back in the day, which I still believe is there's two factions of the D's. The chaotic ones like Kid, Blackbeard, Rocks, and then you have the lawful ones like Luffy and
Law.
yeah, Luffy, Law, and Garp. So I think it only makes sense. However, I don't think the side that the scar marking is on necessarily depicts whether or not you're a good D or a bad D or affiliate. At this point, I'm thinking prominent facial markings probably have something to do with the tie back to Jaya or the ancient kingdom as a whole, not necessarily
The will
any
of the
kind
D.
of, yeah, not necessarily any kind of allegiance to one side or the other based on the markings on the face. I just think
Sure.
that the markings themselves now are prominent.
Sure. All right.
So I
So
guess,
go ahead. Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right, I was just going to say, moving forward, I thought it was very interesting that it was confirmed that Rox himself is the father of Blackbeard. I thought that's something that's probably going to be overlooked just because, it's Rox, we first see him, but people have been speculating about this for years.
Yeah, like isn't his ship named something related to rocks, like Zebek or something?
I think it's the Sword of Zebek or the Revenge of Zebek, something similar.
Okay, so that
So
means that Blackbeard knows who his father is. That's confirmed as well. And yeah, if we even look at them side by side, like Rocks looks just like Blackbeard. They've got like a very similar body type. Even like I guess Zebek looks more buff than Blackbeard does, but face wise and facial feature like facial hair wise, they look very very similar.
Oh, 100%. I think, like I said previously, Rocks looks just like, well, Blackbeard looks just like Rocks. However, Rocks has the whole Akuma, 80s glam rocker thing going on. So
Sure,
I definitely think Blackbeard knows who his father is, at least now. But the real question is, did he have any relationship with his father when he was a child? Did he know Rocks was his dad growing up? Because that would drastically affect his development. And if you really want to go back, the only time we ever see Blackbeard as a kid is from that SBS article where Oda drew all the Shichibukai as kids and or whatever. Blackbeard was drawn as a child. He's sitting alone in the snow. It's nighttime. He's looking up at the moon and he's crying, right? So, I mean, he's giving off really bad orphan energy. So I don't think Blackbeard knew who his dad was. But Ed, I will let you go and explain your pet theory that you had kicking around.
well,
Let us know how serious you are with this one.
I'm not going to take credit for this theory, but I have seen a lot of images, as many of you might have as well, of like a side by side shot, Roxy Zebek and Buggy the Clown. And, if you put like the clown nose on Zebek, they do look very similar. Like they have like the same smile, they have like the same teeth, and like their facial features kind of line up as well. So there is a chance that Buggy could also be the son of Zebek. So another thing about Buggy is that he ended up on a very prominent pirate crew with Goldie Roger, who was Zebek's, rival pirate captain. And also Oda mentioned that if Buggy trained and like put a lot of effort, he'd be as strong as Shanks in power level. So he does have like a large potential to be a great warrior and whatnot. So like there's like arguments to be made. However, it is still kind of, like it's still a bit tinfoily. We don't have other evidence other than their physical features look pretty similar. What do you think about Buggy potentially being son of Zebek?
All I will say is that if Buggy really is the son of Roxy Zebek, I think that's why Buggy wears face paint. It's to cover up his facial features so nobody can tie him to being the son of Roxy Zebek. And I think that's kind of a Oda gag to play. It harkens back to kind of gags back in the day. Think Bugs Bunny wearing the Groucho Marx glasses, nose, and mustache. To fool Elmer Fudd who's running past him. That kind.
You know what? That fits in with the whole Gear 5 Looney Tunes vibe. So it's I'd say that it's definitely worth thinking about, but until we have more information, we can't really for sure say that Buggy's going to be his son.
100%, but you could be onto something, and I will give you 100% credit if that turns out to be true. But with that being said, not only did they discuss that Rox is Blackbeard's father, but right above that, they noted that this is before Rox became the captain of the Rox Pirates. So at this point, are we expected to think Rox is just like some random dude running around causing havoc in the world? We see that Whitebeard, Shiki, and Misbakken are already affiliated with him, so he has to be like some kind of powerful guy that can just easily take out an admiral at Reverie.
Yeah,
So you
so
want to
I don't know. This is probably before the Yonko era, but he is basically Yonko level already because like even in like current present day, like I don't think non-Yonko crews could defeat an admiral. So I would classify him as Yonko level to be able to beat an admiral. He's also got a legendary crew, and two of those people end up being Yonko themselves, and his son ends up being Yonko himself. So yeah, he's already got like just a very powerful presence, and he's interested in talking to Harold. So I'm actually kind of intrigued what their discussion with Harold might be, what he wants to talk to him about. Maybe Zebek noticed Harold at the Reverie, eyeing him because Harold wanted to do something, but he didn't want to break his cover. But it's possible that, Zebek has some sort of hockey that could tell that he was being eyed out by Harold. So yeah, there's just like a lot of things to think about with Zebek.
So there's a couple of questions though, but that is perfect to talk about Zebek's relationship with Harold. Now we knew he went to the Reverie not to represent his own kingdom, but kind of as a covert agent under somebody else's. Do you want to speculate over who brought Harold there in the first place?
I don't really know exactly, but I think that it's probably one of his human allies that got him in there. And I mean, you know, he's already been trying to form alliances with human nations for a while at this point, so it probably wouldn't be out of the ordinary for humans to like hire giants as like guards and stuff. So I think that that's kind of how he, was being like a covert agent. But yeah, my guess is that it's just probably one of the human nations. I couldn't guess which one, but one of them that is invited to the reverie. So like, I mean, out of all of the nations in the present day, the only one that's kind of like quote unquote good guys is the Nefertiti family. So if I had to guess, it'd be for that family.
I think that would be causing too many waves, but I do think it's very interesting that during this reverie, Harold was almost captured. I think it's very similar to what almost happened with Shirahoshi and what happened with Vivi at this most recent reverie, right? So I think maybe one of the Tenryobito celestial dragons took a liking to Harold, knew that giants aren't really well spread in the world, wanted a giant slave and was trying to capture Harold, and was trying to use an admiral to capture Harold. But I think Rox, for whatever reason, stepped in, killed that admiral, and then saved Harold. And I think at this point, I think Harold owes Rox a debt.
Oh. See, I didn't pick up on the fact that Harold was being defended by rocks. I didn't pick up on that at all. So I that's a great theory. I would agree that if this is the case, then yeah, I think that Rox is probably trying to get his debt paid back at this point. He probably needs something from Harold, and he's like, "Hey, I need your help. I saved you. You're gonna help me."
100%. I think that's a really good angle for this. So, somebody who's able to go to the reverie, kill an admiral, and leave relatively easily, seemingly by themselves. Do you want to speculate on what power that kind of individual might have? I mean, just bypassing the simple, oh, he's a good fighter and he has hockey. That kind of stuff.
I mean, I already kind of touched upon it already. I think he's Yonko level already. So that's just how I feel. So I think that he's probably about as strong as Kaido is present day.
Do you think he has a devil fruit that we've seen? Do you think he has a devil fruit at all?
Yeah, I do think he has a devil fruit, but I don't know what it is. It might be the one that Blackbeard got. So it might be the I don't know, like the darkness fruit, whatever
Gura
it's
Gura
called.
no Mi?
Yeah, the
Oh,
Gura
no,
Gura.
that's the Yomi. No, the Gura Gura is the Shake Shake. Yomi Yomi no Mi is the darkness.
I think it's the Yomi Yomi then. Yeah, I think if he has one, that would be my best guess right now, just because that's the one that Blackbeard coveted. But however, it could also be that he knew that his father wanted that devil fruit, and maybe he never got it before he died, and that was his dream to get it, and Blackbeard's the one who ended up getting it. So those are kind of like my leading ideas.
Interesting. And as a character, I just wanted to point out that Zebek, he really does have a lot of parallels, it seems, with Dragon. They both have like some crazy looking face tattoo. They're both chaotically opposed to the world government, and they both carry the will of D. Do you think that they're just two sides of the same coin, really? That's trying to take down the world government, but one's trying to do it in a more lawful, reserved way, and the other's just trying to do it absolutely chaotically?
Yeah, I think that that's very valid, and also they're both fathers of Yonko. Yeah, I think that that's a very good way to look at it. They both really just dislike the world government, and they're doing it in their own ways of taking them down. So yeah,
I want to say that this is probably just another example of inherited will that has lasted since the Void Century. And I think when we go back, either they are both descendants of Joy Boy himself, or I think Luffy would probably come from Joy Boy's side, whereas I think Zebek would probably come from Joy Boy's chaotic analog on the other side.
I think that they're not necessarily related to Joy Boy. I think that the whole idea with One Piece is that the wills will be passed down from one generation to the next, but not necessarily through blood alone. So it could be by who raised you or like the village you grew up in or something like that. Not necessarily just by blood. So I agree that, it could just be from Joy Boy's will in the past, but I don't necessarily believe that they're actually related to Joy Boy.
Understood. I think the direct relationship might be a little schlocky, but we do see those kind of tropes in some other Japanese media. So I think
So schlocky.
sorry.
No, it's funny.
So we know that fortunately Zebek dies. He doesn't die at God Valley. We know he was killed after. I just wanted to speculate a little bit on Zebek's death. We know he was a rival of Garp and Roger, or Roger, but he definitely fought them both in the final battle at God Valley. We saw that Garp and Roger teamed up to defend the world nobles of all people, right? Two Ds team up against one D to defend their sworn enemies at God Valley. Interesting. We know that Garp and Roger, both of their descendants, were raised as brothers. We know Luffy and Ace were both raised as brothers. And Blackbeard took Ace out, was responsible for the world government killing Ace, and Blackbeard also tried to take out Luffy. So I think that with these parallels, I don't think it's a stretch that Zebek was also killed after having a son. And I think that is the cause. Well, obviously, he was killed after having a son. But I think it's very similar to how Roger died, where I think after. Do you think Zebek turned himself in?
No, I don't think Zebek.
He's that noble.
No, I don't think he would do that. I think that he is potentially the reason why Blackbeard can't sleep. We can get into that a little bit later though, because I think I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, I think that his death has to be special. My guess is that at God Valley he might have been grievously injured and on death's bed, and maybe did some magic or something to continue his will on into his son.
All right, all right. So I guess we'll just go on and we'll just talk about Zebek's son a little bit more, Blackbeard. So we know that Blackbeard had a relationship with Whitebeard, right? Whitebeard took Blackbeard onto his ship. So do you think it's a stretch to think that Whitebeard knew that Blackbeard was Zebek's son?
I think that there's no way he didn't know just because of how similar they look. They look like they could be twins, you know? So I think that there's absolutely no way that Whitebeard didn't know that Blackbeard was Zebek's son. I think that he wanted to take him on because he felt bad that his father died. I think that he felt like he wanted to raise him in a manner that would be healthy for him, knowing that his father was kind of deranged working under him for so long. So I think he wanted to give him like a loving family, he wanted to be the loving father figure that Blackbeard never had. And yeah, that's what I think.
That's such a good point. It really is. Because we know that the Rocks crew itself was driven by one thing and one thing alone, and that was power. We know all the members were jockeying for power via their own physical strength and other means. So it's not really a surprise that somebody who grew up with the nature of rocks, possibly only under the tutelage of rocks, would kill a crewmate and purposely defy all of what we know about the normal quote unquote pirate code to take out one of their crewmates to obtain power. So I think it perfectly in line with something Rocks would have done.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely diametrically opposed to everything that Whitebeard would have wanted for his own crew, who he wanted as a family because Whitebeard never had a family of his own.
And I mean, if you look at present day Blackbeard, like he's also kind of following in Zebek's footsteps because he's just trying to get power. So in the One Piece world, devil fruits are power. So he's just been targeting specific devil fruit users to steal their devil fruit, kill them and steal their powers. So that's kind of what his agenda is currently. And getting strong enough to overthrow the world government is his end game. But yeah, I think it's just kind of interesting that even though he was raised by Whitebeard to be like a father figure towards him, he still ended up, you know, being just like his father. And I guess why is it like that? This is like a very nature versus nurture type of question. And even though he's being nurtured by Whitebeard, who's, you know, very honorable and respectable person, his inner nature of being Zebek's son, he's still kind of behaving a lot more like Zebek anyway, regardless of how Whitebeard is treating him.
Yes, I think it goes on to that whole inherited will motif that we talk about so much. Do you want to go ahead and explain a little bit how you think Blackbeard inherited the will of his father?
Yeah, so this is, again, this is kind of tinfoily, so take it with a grain of salt, but we know that Blackbeard has like, he's kind of like special, right? He's got like a special body type, and that's why he can have two different devil fruits. And yet, normally, if you have a second devil fruit, I believe you die. So like the devils inside the fruit, they kind of clash with each other, and yeah, you won't survive. And we all know that Blackbeard has two different devil fruit powers. So yeah, I think that maybe Zebek somehow kind of is living his will, his mind is living inside of Blackbeard, and Blackbeard he can't dream. We know that. He can't sleep. Sorry, he can't sleep. We know that. So my guess is that during his normal sleeping hours, when he's like the most vulnerable, maybe the will of Zebek, his father, is kind of taking control over his body, or just more strongly influencing Blackbeard. And maybe also because his father is, his father's will and stuff is still living inside of him, that's what allows him to have two different devil fruits, because one devil fruit is attuned to Blackbeard, and then the second one is attuned to rocks. So that's kind of like where my head is at right now with that. Again, it's a little tinfoily, but it's just kind of fun to think about.
Mentally, I always put myself in the position that I think, as a last ditch effort to save his own skin or some other means, I think Rox physically like poured his will into his son, like a baby Blackbeard.
Mm,
So I think that's one reason why Blackbeard can't sleep, is because he can't dream, because he hasn't inherited this will of rocks in such a way he is unable to have his own dreams, therefore unable to sleep.
yeah.
Um, Now we know that Rocks is the father of Blackbeard, but I mean, it seems pretty Oda that it's possible that Rocks is not the physical father of Blackbeard, but maybe the like ideological father. In the event he did like pour his will into a child to save himself, he could also be considered a father in a way.
Yeah. My thought on that is, unless physically pouring your will in someone transforms how you look, because he looks just like Zebek, I think that Zebek is the father. And also, like, it clearly states that Zebek is father of Blackbeard. So I think that, like, he's biologically the son of Zebek. But why is his name Marshall D. Teach instead of Roxy teach? So that was a question me and Adam were kind of tossing around with each other. And my first thought was, well, he's got a mother too, and it's not unheard of for a child to take the mother's name in the One Piece universe, just like Porcus D. Rogue. So maybe he took on his mother's name. What do you think about that?
I definitely think it's possible. It's a way to stay low until you're able to realize your full power and at least fend for yourself a little bit. I think it's a definite parallel between Ace and Blackbeard themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ace being Ace being Gold Roger's son, took his mom's last name to protect himself and his mother. I think it would be very similar that Blackbeard would do the same thing. And I mean, you also can grapple with the possibility that maybe Rox isn't even Zebek's real last name.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something else.
Yeah, I agree. Like that's another potential. I think most likely it's his real name. And yeah, I like the idea right now that Teach just took on his mother's name. So yeah, let's move forward to Hadruden. So yeah, we basically kind of see, starting from last chapter, that as soon as he heard about Loki, he already had resentment towards his younger brother. So last chapter, he said that he doesn't believe that Loki's his brother because they don't have the same mother, and he doesn't really want to accept him as a brother. And then this chapter, he gets attacked by giants, them wanting him to be a sacrifice to basically stop Loki's curse. So he's already being attacked. Him and his mother are physically being attacked just by his relation to Loki. And then also, in present day, he thinks that Loki killed his father. Well, I guess he's thought that for years since his father passed away. And then also he might even believe that in Loki's curse. So yeah, there's just like a lot of, it's just really unfortunate that just from birth, Hadrudin has despised his younger brother. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on Hadrudin's relationship with his brother?
I'm just saying, so, think about it, right? There's a father, has a good kid, has a bad kid, and, these things just happen until the end of time. Think about it. If you were a pirate, you had a good kid, you had a bad kid. These things just go on until the end of time.
Sure.
But moving on. I mean, that's all I really have to say about Hasrudin's relationship with Loki right now until we see it a little bit more. It makes sense that they're kids and they're going to be jockeying for power, especially when your dad's the king, right?
Yeah.
It's who's the heir and who's the spare, that kind of thing. But we do see that even though Loki is very wild and chaotic, Harold was very wild and chaotic too, and he kind of broke out of it once he saw the error of his ways and found the love of a woman. So we do see that King Harold is he's bringing allies to Elbaf. He's investing in his country. He's repairing all the woes that Loki has seemingly brought onto his country, and he announces his dream. His dream is that giants are to be welcomed everywhere in the world, which is very similar to a dream that we've seen from somebody also affiliated with the Giants, Big Mom, whose dream was for everybody to be at the same level and to be able to eat at the same table. So I find that to be very interesting.
Well, also the fishmen too. They wanted to be able to, come up to the land and not be discriminated against. So there's a lot of parallels with the different races wanting to be accepted in the One Piece universe.
Yeah, I think these are just all inherited wills that we just keep talking about, right? So I think this is like a big chapter that, although we are seeing the past, we get to see like the distant past, like pre-Void Century stuff. If you just try to look a little bit in between the lines and a little bit deeper than what you see. But I do think, I do love the character growth from Harold. So I
Yeah.
might get a little choked up when he dies.
Well, also, we already saw him die, so that's okay. But also, another interesting thing about Harold is when we first see him, like, in his youngest state, when he's like a teenager, like, he looks evil. Like, he looked like a bad guy. And as he's aged, after he started talking with Ida and kind of became this respectable person who wants to bring peace to the world, he looks more like Garp and more like, adult Luffy. Like, so like, I think Oda likes to draw people in a manner that they look more Luffy like if they're good guys, and then they look more like evil if they're bad guys. And so Harold had the path of being an evil person, and then he had a change of heart and kind of grew into this like, just more good guy looking person. Like, it's just kind of interesting that his character design changed over time.
Oh, 100%, but that's just the way Oda does it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You could take all the text panels away, you can take everything you know about a character. Just like body language is probably the most primal way us as humans can communicate with each other. Oda can communicate with just his drawings alone, and I think that's the sign of a master.
True, true.
So, if we want to discuss the Rocks Pirates a bit, we do get to see a young Whitebeard, a young Shiki, and a young Stussy. Do you have any comments on that? The only thing I just want to mention is I absolutely love young Shiki's design. I think he definitely has that Wano swagger. I love it.
It's just interesting that those are the only three we see. I wonder if there's more Rocks pirates that are on the island with them. So yeah, I just think that's interesting to see them younger. Like, it's always fun. I agree that the Shiki design especially is the best outside of Zebek himself. Shiki just looks great. He's got that cigar still. Oh yeah, I guess this is technically before the Rocks Pirates started, but like it's like the beginnings of a cruise. So you know how like Luffy, he started with Zoro and Nami and Usopp, and He always called it a crew from the beginning, whereas, right now, maybe Rocks isn't necessarily a crew. Maybe he gets the idea from Goldie Roger or something when Roger forms his crew, and he's like, you know what, we're a crew too. So, yeah, technically it's not a crew quite yet, but it's the beginnings of one.
Do you want to speculate a little bit on why they would follow such a man?
I think that my guess is that he probably like beat them in combat. And he's like, okay, well, or maybe he saved their life, and he's like, okay, you guys follow me now. But like in terms of rocks, he's just collecting powerful people. He only cares about gaining power. So that's what he's looking for. So if he's finds someone who's like Whitebeard, who's just very powerful, he's like, I want you, you're mine. And I'm going to do anything I can to be able to claim you as mine. So I don't know exactly how he convinced them to join, but judging by how Whitebeard is now, or I guess Whitebeard was pre-time skip, he's a very honorable and respectable person. So either he had a change of heart and reformed, or he was coerced some way by Rox to join the crew or join his group. So yeah.
Very, very interesting. Okay, moving on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Galela band. Those were the giants that were seemingly lost or overtaken by the world government. And we noticed something. Don't you think it's very interesting that this crew of giant shipwrights called the Galela Band sounds very similar to the most famous ship company in the One Piece universe, the Gali Lock?
Yeah, there's no way that this is a coincidence. So first off, let's just kind of go over the galley law, just like a reminder, since this has been a long time since Galley Law Company was created. But yeah, it's a company of shipwrights. It was founded by Iceberg in Water 7. They're deeply respected for both their skills in carpentry and fighting. It's the company that CP9 infiltrated. And even though Iceberg isn't a giant, he probably knows about the ancient Galela band. So it's gotta be an homage to that.
So I just wanted to note as well the Gali Law Company, we've seen they have a bunch of ships under their fleet. However, one of the most prominent ones that we've seen in the One Piece storyline was noted to be much larger than a normal ship for humans, like huge, like maybe even, I don't know, a ship for giants?
Yeah, that can't be a coincidence. So maybe they had, it's possible that they also just had a contract with a giant group. So it could be that.
I find it also to be interesting that the best wood in the world to create a ship from is Atom wood, which is from the Atom tree, which I don't know is on Elbaf.
True. That's very true. Yeah, I think that that's all. Yeah, it all adds up to, yes, they're related. So I'll go on my theory about the Galley Law a little bit further, but let's go to talk about the Galilei
Galela.
Galela band. Sorry. There's Galila and Galela. So Galela band is a group of giants, and they're hardy, hammer wielding shipwright warriors. So again, it's like basically the same thing other than one is humans, one is giants. Stanson is the only giant we've seen that fights with a hammer. Oh yeah, the panel that we see with the Galela band, we actually see a giant that has like a big hammer that actually looks a lot like Ragnar, Loki's warhammer. So maybe it's actually Ragnar was created by the Galela band member and he inherited it from them somehow. But anyway, Stanson's too young to be an original member of the Galela band, but he's still a shipwright. We know that he's part of the new giant pirates, so he's their shipwright, and he was captured by the world government to be sold in the Sao Body auction house. And Silver's Rayleigh was the one who ended up freeing him, if you don't recall. And yeah, he's part of the new giant warrior pirates. So you want to talk about potential Usopp correlation?
Oh, yeah, I recognized this almost immediately when they were talking about the Galela band. way back, way back in the story, we're talking like Fishman, not even Fishman Island. We're talking Arlong Park, of
Wow.
all places. Usopp used to fight with a hammer back in the day. Usopp, at that point in time, was also the shipwright for the Straw Hat crew, and Usopp also had an infatuation with the Giants. So I think it's just parallels. Maybe Usopp also read stories about the Galila Band, some of the fables that he would read that would inspire him to make up his own lies and his own stories, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, he always has had an obsession or an interest with giants. So I think that's a great find and great catch, Adam. So yeah,
So I think it's not a far stretch. The Galila Band were a bunch of giants that traveled around the world and wrote letters of their expedition. So I think that it's really not far off to think that some of them might, if they were not captured, then some of them might have settled in Water 7 or at least visited at some point in time and traded some secrets or something. What do you think?
yeah. So this is my cook. So I think that maybe Tom the shipwright, that's a fishman, former sun pirate. Former fishman pirate. Sorry, right? No, is it sun pirate? Yeah, sun pirate.
Yeah, he was a member of the Sun Pirates. He has a tattoo.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that potentially a giant from the Galela band might have settled on Water 7 and given birth to Tom. Or maybe, maybe he just met some fisherman mermaid and they had their kid and then Tom ended up in Water 7. But either way, I I think that there's a potential that Tom is half giant. And, with Iceberg being Tom's first and most dedicated apprentice, he probably told, stories about his past and his parentage and the Galela band. And that's how that's how Iceberg ended up getting the idea of naming his company the Galila Company, just in honor of that history. So even if, Tom's, parents didn't end up settling on Water 7, Tom ended up settling there, and Tom ended up teaching everyone about being a shipwright and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just kind of like where my mind is at with Tom.
Yeah, 100%. I think we always assumed that Tom was just large because, he's a fishman. He's a longhorn cowfish. Cowfish are big, right? So I think we always assumed he was like some form of like giant fish. But I think it only makes sense that he was like a mermaid giant hybrid. And to your point, even if he didn't grow up in Water 7, he made his way there eventually. And, we see in One Piece stories they carry historical weight, right? They inspire people, they tell stories from the past. So it would only make sense that, regardless of how long ago the Galela band was traveling the seas, I think it would make sense that some of their stories are still passed along, especially by their descendants.
But also another thing that I want to bring up is that Oda recently brought up the fact that there's different types of human giant hybrids, and he made a point to talk about that recently. So it goes to show that, maybe that's not all. Like, there's no reason why the giants couldn't have had children with fishmen as well. So I think that it's just very, very plausible that Tom is half fishman, half giant.
That's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. We do see how many parallels there are in this story and all these things that Oda hides for us to find, decades in the past.
Yeah.
Um, I know you touched on it kind of a little bit during our chapter breakdown, but I think we're seeing a couple parallels here between Loki and Kaido. Do you want to discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like what I brought up was, during the chapter was that they both fell from a very high place. So they're both like very depressed. So I'm not exactly sure why Kaido was depressed. I don't know, maybe but Kaido was depressed too, and he's a drunk, and that's kind of how he's been dealing with his depression. But they both have tried to jump off a high place and harm themselves, and they weren't successful. So They do have that in common. Now, Loki, the way that he deals with being depressed, instead of drinking, because, he's still a child, he's kind of become a bully, and he's trading his animal companions to terrorize the people of Elbaf, to terrorize his brother Hadrudin and his friends. So that's kind of like how he lashes out, whereas Kaido just drinks his sorrows away. But yeah.
Yes, there are a lot of parallels. I think Kaido's motivation for trying to end it was he was looking for a good fight and he was depressed that he took out Odin and nobody else could match his
Oh,
vigor, at
yeah.
least on the battlefield.
True. I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
So we see they're both just massively depressed. They're both hulking, large giants, perhaps, with large horns of the ancient variety. I don't know. Maybe Onis? And we see that Onis in One Piece, at least, they tend to favor a certain weapon. They tend to favor that spiked club, that Kanabo, which you even mentioned during the review.
Hmm.
So, I mean, and Kaido lives in a place called Onigashima, which is the skull of what appears to be a giant ancient giant that happens to have, I don't know, scar or a cut on the left side of its face.
On his eye,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of coincidences there. I, I think that Kaido right now, I don't believe that he's a giant or like has any giant blood, even though he has a massive size. I think that maybe like we were talking about this before, where the whole like emu and the Othello board and flipping people to be evil instead of good. I think that potentially, just like how the giants, when they get flipped, they turn into ancient giants and they grow larger. Maybe the Oni are kind of like the human analog or comparison to that. So the humans that get flipped over to emus, black side, they also grow in size and stature, and they also grow horns.
Now, we see Kaido when he was young, and he also has the horns and seemingly the gigantic size. So I was thinking, maybe if, Kaido was captured like 50, 60 times by the world government, so it would make sense that, you know, they would try to flip him or turn him into an ancient giant. And Kaido also had that ancient giant program where he was the numbers, where he was trying to create ancient giants himself. So I know the world government was looking for that, but like, what's Kaido's motivation beyond power? I I think it's
I think that Kaido's motivation might have been to train someone that's strong enough to fight him. Like it could be as simple as that. He's not the smartest person that we've seen. Also, yeah, no, I think that that's just it could just be as simple as that.
okay. I'll let you have that one. Now we do know that Kaido was also a member of the Rocks Pirates. Now we see Loki met the Rocks crew before they were an official pirate company. I just thought it was very interesting that they have that kind of underlying thread in between them.
Yeah, true. Yeah, they do have that commonality as well. And then also, yeah, since Loki wanted to join the Rocks Pirates, like it's interesting because it looks like Kaido actually isn't on the crew yet at this point either. Wasn't it Big Mom that recruited Kaido initially to the Rocks Pirates?
Yes, Big Mom also recruited Kaido. It's very interesting. They all have like a common thread, like Loki, Kaido, Big Mom. It's very interesting
Well,
because
also if Loki does have the Yormonger Devil Fruit, then they're both giant snakes, Devil Fruits as well. Because Kaido is kind of like a giant snake dragon.
yes, they both have seemingly legendary devil fruits. Now Loki's hasn't been confirmed yet,
Yeah, right.
but we've seen Kaido's, and they both have mythical devil fruits. So it's very interesting. I hope that we get to see some backstory between maybe Loki and Kaido when they were kids. I wonder if they're the same age. It makes sense if they were. Did Loki ever join the Rocks crew? Do we know that? Maybe
I think
they
that
did like get Loki off the island.
I thought that he wanted to, but he never joined. But I don't know why I think that, but that was what I remember.
Interesting. We'll have to do some more research, but I think it would make sense, kind of similar to like some of the parallels that we've seen with Wano, right? That if Loki's strong enough, like they'll take him so that he could see the world and cause havoc, or if he's not strong enough, then it gives him a goal to train and to aspire to. Maybe in that way, Loki kind of looked up to Kaido.
Sure, and maybe, you know what, maybe if Loki did, it's possible Loki did join up with the Rock's crew for a bit, because we know that when King Harald passed away, that Loki was gone for a while, so what if he was gone due to him being out with Rocks?
Oh, maybe that's the debt. Maybe Rox wants one of the strongest warriors from Elbaf to accompany him on whatever journey he has, and Harold gave him Loki.
And honestly, yeah, they have what's kind of insane is that Loki survived a massive drop as a newborn infant. So he's got the durability basically of an adult Kaido, like as an infant. Now in terms of strength, he's probably not as strong as adult Kaido as an infant or a kid, but durability wise, he is very hardy. So yeah,
Isn't that an easy way to get your idiot son out of the house so he could stop destroying it while you're trying to rebuild it?
that's true. Yeah, that totally could have been Harold's plan, is to just kind of get him out of the way and maybe start training Hadrudin to potentially become the actual heir instead of Loki. Which again, that's just a pet theory. We'll see what happens. I'm sure shortly in the next few chapters.
No, I think that's actually what happens. I think that they take. I'm just going to speculate here. I think that they take Loki on the Rocks crew to settle the debt. Loki goes with them to see the world, to see if he can actually find the thing that heals the hole in his heart. And because they're such a rowdy band of strong individuals, they can keep Loki in line because they're all obviously stronger than he is. So I think they take Loki around. Loki learns so much about the world and everyone and everything. And, he grows up a little bit and he comes home and he tries to share this with his dad and he gets framed.
Yeah, that's honestly very plausible. And again, we're gonna find out real soon in the next few chapters here during this flashback. But yeah, I'm just really excited to see what's gonna happen now that Rox is finally in the picture. We've heard about him for decades at this point, and now we finally get to see him in the flesh.
Yes, this is really what I wait for. This is why I've been reading the series for so long. It's just moments like these that really make me appreciate the story. And really, it's kind of bittersweet because we know that the One Piece story is getting all fleshed out and it's getting all wrapped up. I still love it. It's just going to be really interesting to see where Oda takes things in these next couple of arcs.
For sure, for sure.
All right, and with that being said, this has been Void Century chapter episode 33, chapter 1154. Thank you again for listening to us. You can reach out to us at the Void Century Podcast at gmail.com. Listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please send us a message or a comment. We would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.